Welcome back to the recipe book. We already use ngIf and ngFor in this section, so we're already using directives. But now I want to enhance this project by adding our own directive, which allows us to open the dropdowns, which don't work as of now if you click them. They don't work because we didn't import Bootstrap's JavaScript code, and I don't want to import this because Angular should be the only thing interacting with my DOM. But now with the directive knowledge, we can create our own directive which will manipulate these buttons. I'll add the directive in the shared folder and I will name it Dropdown Directive. So the file is named dropdown directive.ts. Of course, you could use the CLI to create it, and you could even point to the shared folder in the command to automatically generate it in this shared folder. I'll do it manually though, always a good practice. And here the name should be Dropdown Directive, like this. And of course, we need to add a decorator to turn this into a directive. So it's the add directive decorator, which needs to be imported from @Angular core. And here there is one thing I need to set up. On the selector, I want to define how I can add my directive. And I will use an attribute selector, therefore I'll enclose the name in squared brackets. The name now will be app dropdown, to have a unique name which doesn't accidentally interfere with an officially existing attribute name or anything like that. Now what should this directive do? I want to add some functionality to it, which allows us to add a certain CSS class to the element it sits on once it is clicked, so once this element the directive sits on is clicked, and remove the class once we click again, let's say. So this is your challenge. Try implementing such a method, which basically listens to clicks and then toggles some property which determines whether some class is attached or not, and also try implementing some code which dynamically attaches a CSS class or not. Before you actually start though, let's find out which class we need to attach. If you go to the recipe detail component here, if you attach the open CSS class to the div which holds button group, and you go to your application and select the recipe, you see now it looks like the dropdown was opened. So it's this open CSS class, the same for the usage in the header we need to attach. So that's your challenge. Build a dropdown directive which attaches this class whenever we click on it or removes it once we click a second time. Let's build this directive together now. So as explained, I want to toggle it upon clicking this. So to listen to a click, I should add host listener, which is to be imported from Angular core, and I want to listen to a click event. Then I want to execute toggle open, which looks like or sounds like a fitting name because that is what I want to do. I want to toggle whether this should be opened or not. Well, then I will add isOpen directive, which I'll set to false initially. And in my host listener, I'll simply set open or isOpen to, well, what it is currently not. So if isOpen was true, it will now be set to false and the other way around. So with that, I'm toggling that property. Now to dynamically attach or detach a CSS class depending on this, all I have to do is I'll add host binding, which needs to be imported from Angular core and allows us to bind to properties of the element the directive is placed on. And here I want to bind to the class property of that component, of that element. Class simply is an array of all the classes. And here it's all about this open class. As you learned, that's the CSS class we need to attach dynamically or detach. And now the rest will be handled by Angular. Since I bind to isOpen, this will not be attached initially. Whenever isOpen switches to true, it will be attached, and whenever it switches to false, it will be removed. And that's our entire directive. Now to be able to use it, I need to go to app module and add it here, add the dropdown directive, and add the import pointing to the shared folder. And with that imported now, I can use it. I can use it in the detail component. Here, I have to use it on the div or on the element where open should be attached to in the end. So in this case, the div with the button group class. And here I'll add my own app dropdown directive without squared brackets, without assigning any value because, well, I don't need to configure anything on this directive. And now in the header, here the place where I need to add it is this list item with the class of dropdown. Here, this is what will actually need the open class to show something. With that in place and ngserve still running, let's save this and view this in our application and see if this works the way it should. Let's test it in the header. Looks pretty good. We close it by clicking again. And here on our recipe, that looks awesome too. So that's working exactly the way I want it to work. And with that in place, that already is everything I wanted to build. So a relatively short recipe book section here. Now we can move on to services, a very powerful tool. And then we will add services in this app here to greatly enhance it and fix some things which we had to do kind of complicated thus far. We'll also add some new features.